Welcome to the Dungeon Master's Block, the place where we focus on the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God, killing characters, and lowering the egos of all other players at the table. My name is DM Ian, and today I am joined by none other than the illustrious DM Neal.
Hey, DM Neal, aka Joke Maniac.
And today we are talking with a very special guest, the legendary John Arcadian. But before we get into that, Neal, we have some iTunes reviews.
Yes, we do. We have two of them, as we are wont to do. And the first one is from Lunatar, and it's titled, "This Podcast Flays My Mind."
I like it.
5 stars. Yeah, off to a great start. I just happened across this podcast while searching through the tomes, and was I pleased. Even my familiar loves it. Do yourself a favor and start from episode 1 and cast haste so you get caught up fast. Love you guys, great content and advice. I know that I personally cast haste pretty much every time I listen, so great advice, and thank you, Lunatar, for the amazing review.
Yeah, thank you very much. This next one is from Asel Mani. Excuse me if I mispronounced that name. Again, it is 5-star review. It says, "These guys rock. I just started and am now on episode 7. I'm learning so much on how to be a DM and can't wait to catch up." Well, we hope you catch up soon, and thank you for your 5-star review.
Definitely. With that, we are going to head into the absolutely terrifying meat.
I'm starving. We ain't had nothing but maggoty bread for 3 stinking days.
Why can't we have some meat?
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
So welcome to the meat. Today we have a very special guest, as we mentioned earlier, none other than the legendary John Arcadian, who is an author, a game designer, and head gnome at Gnome Stew. Why don't you say hi to everybody, John?
Hi to everybody.
Yeah. And you know, we do this with all our guests. We have a couple of different interview questions we like to ask. And so, Neal, why don't you take the first one?
Definitely. John, I like this one because it's very open-ended and I don't really know how to ask it well because I also don't know what I'm going to get back. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself? I mean, literally anything you want, I guess.
All right, literally anything. All right, so, I am John Arcadian. I am the head gnome over at Gnome Stew, which I think is the most prestigious, most fun title I have ever held in my life.
I would agree.
We went back and forth as to what to call the head gnome when I took over Gnome Stew, and I wanted Gnome Tater, because it has a fun thing. You're the Gnome Tater, But no, we went for head gnome. We decided to keep it classy for some reason. Yeah, I do a little bit of everything. I do web development and web design for a lot of companies in the gaming sphere. I do freelance writing. I do freelance art direction. I do cartography, which is my newest skill. I'm not a huge artist, but I learned that I can photo manipulate awesomely, and that is what you need for a lot of modern cartography. So I'm able to kind of pass through that. Yeah, and more often than not, on any non-below 30-degree day, I am in a kilt. That's pretty much most of everything about me.
That is fantastic. Gnome Tater. That should have been the title, but I appreciate keeping it classy. The second question we like to ask is there anything that you are currently working on that we should know about? Any projects you've got going on that you can share? What is going on over in Gnome Stewville?
Something mind-numbingly applicable to the topic we're talking about?
Oh, mind-numbingly. I can give you mind-numbingly. Yeah, no, currently I'm working on, we're working to get the Book of the Tarrasque, the print version out. It's all set. It's waiting for verification from Drive-Thru RPG. We're also over at Encoded Designs working on a book of 30 paranoia plots and how to write paranoia plots. That is, just waiting to be pushed out there as well. And then the other thing that I've kind of been working on back and forth, and I've already got most of this, and it's the most ambitious project I've taken, is an animated web series to get new gamers into game. It's animated is somewhat generous, but it kind of looks, has a format of like a 16-bit RPG game, but it is aimed solely at no rules, nothing like that, just targeting new gamers and telling them, hey, here's all these tropes you're going to be thrown up against. Here's how this works. Here's how this feels. And we want to make this a comfortable space for you. So the best way to kind of do that was do it, kind of like Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, do this animated thing so everybody can see a little bit of themselves in the characters.
Yeah, that sounds so awesome. So the next one up is, how did you first get started in RPG?
I first got started, way back in the day, during the Satanic Panic, as, Jim McClure's writing a book about now. So we're talking about that. I was never allowed to play, but I was allowed to read the books, because that wasn't as scary as going out and playing, when I was a younger kid to my parents. So I had all the books and I read them, and I was like right there on the start of 2E, just like, ooh, tell me more, tell me more. Got to college, I started playing a game, and after a couple of bad DMing experiences from the DM, I said, I can do this better than that guy can. And so I kind of like slid in and took over the game and got everybody into my game, and then it just kind of like snowballed from there.
John, now it's time for the surprise question, which we like to spring on our guests so you don't have time to prepare for it. And your question this time is strangely applicable to you. If you could spend eternity as any monster, what would that monster be and why?
Ooh, all right. That's a good one. Because, I'm going to talk about the Tarrasque, but I would not want to spend eternity as the Tarrasque. That would not be fun. I mean, it might be mindlessly fun. Like, yeah, let's go destroy this because I hate everything. Rawr. That would be fun on a very selfish level. But I mean, I think I'd have to go for one of like the magical monsters, that has like alter self or polymorph. So you kind of have options there. Yeah. So I mean, let's just go big. Let's go for one of like the Deva angels, Like let's do that. Let's go the full divine path and just be like, yep, I'm an angel. What are you going to do about it?
I dig it. I like it a lot. So with that, let's actually dig into our topic today. We are going to be talking about one of the most powerful monsters in D&D lore, one of the hardest ever to kill, one of the ones that DMs are scared to use, the Tarrasque.
Ooh, the Tarrasque.
I can honestly say I've only ever encountered this monster one time.
Right? And you ran away the entire time.
But, that just goes to show that the Tarrasque isn't ever really used. And so people might not know a lot about it, but what we like to do in these episodes of RAAH Real Monster is kind of dive into the lore of these little known or maybe widely known creatures, so that way we can appreciate them a bit more. So with the Tarrasque, we wanted to start off by talking about the origins of the Tarrasque. And if memory serves me correctly, TSR, who was, if I remember correctly, the original publisher of Dungeons and Dragons, nor Wizards of the Coast has provided any sort of definitive answer on where the Tarrasque actually came from or why it's here. John, is that an accurate estimation?
Oh, and that is such a big question, because, I did a whole history section because the history of the Tarrasque is phenomenally interesting. It's this creature with such mystery around it. And I think they did that on purpose. But it is hard to nail down what the actual definitive, because, there's a lot of stories out there. And I've talked to people who kind of been around at that time, and they're like, oh, yeah, this was, Gary Gygax wanted a kaiju in here. The development team wanted to put this big giant monster in.
So for those who might not be familiar with Japanese lore, what exactly is a kaiju?
Yeah, kaiju is a Japanese term for your Godzilla rubber suit sort of giant monster, so it's any kind of Mothra or Gamera or, King Ghidorah or any of those, sort of creatures that they did the like 70s giant, monster TV shows around.
What was, why am I forgetting the movie? The one that came out where that's what they called every big monster.
Oh, you mean Pacific Rim. Guillermo del Toro's love letter to the kaiju genre.
Yes. Which total tangent, but I'm going to leave it in the podcast because I think it's amazing.
Tangents are great.
If you watch Cloverfield, as if it is the prequel to Pacific Rim, it elevates both movies. Cloverfield is the first introduction of kaiju to the world. Think about it.
That is a great way.
Yeah.
I may have to go watch Cloverfield now.
Yeah. Done. There you go. Okay, now we'll move back to the greatest kaiju of Dungeons & Dragons.
The greatest kaiju.
The Tarrasque.
Yeah, so the stories, the kind of folklore goes that, it was put in because they wanted this sort of thing in there, and if you look at the first kind of art, it does kind of look like somebody was described like draw a guy in a rubber suit sort of thing. It looks, little, even compared to the other monsters in art, like it looks a little odd for that sort of thing. But yeah, so as far as like why it's in D&D, that was the first sort of origin, but they never really talk about it. It's just this thing from someplace, and they leave the mystery very open around that until about 4th edition, where they talk about how it's the primordials who wanted to get back at the gods and are like, oh, let's go like make a thing to destroy all of creation, or the elemental princes, the primordial elemental princes in 4th edition. That was where they first kind of wrote in a 4th edition thing. Every other edition has kind of just been, yeah, it's a little bit here or there. There's articles about the ecology of the Tarrasque, which talks a lot about it, but it still always leaves that mystery a little bit open. Just to, make it that sort of, we know it's here, it has this giant effect, but discovering it now is something you can do with your characters.
Huh. Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. I like the fact that there's sort of this mystery behind it, because it's one of those creatures that looks and feels very almost alien in a way. And the origins, you can do a lot to play with that in your world if there's no Tarrasque, or if there's no like world-ending sort of creature. And the way that the Tarrasque functions is very cool and lends to sort of that mystery of the actual origin story. And I do think, I agree with you that it's sort of a throwback to the kaiju, because even in your book, there's kind of like that history of the Tarrasque throughout all of the different iterations that you have. And some of the artwork in there is very, like it varies from version to version. It's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting to actually look at how the Tarrasque evolved in D&D.
Oh, yeah.
I know, honestly, that's probably for me personally, one of the most interesting sections of the Book of the Tarrasque, because that history is so varied. And I know from when I started in second edition, like the kind of thing behind the Tarrasque was like, oh, it shows up once every 100 years, rampages for a while, and then goes away. It's like the mystery behind that. It's like you could live your entire adventuring career and have no chance of interacting with it if you were a human. And it's just like, what happens for like the other 99 years? Like, where does it go? What does it do? And there's so much mystery. And it's like, even when it does show up, I don't know that I want to do anything with it, because I'm probably just going to die.
And that's one of the great things I love about the Tarrasque and the way they do it. There's so much open space around it. They've still got this really interestingly designed creature that has a lot of like, why does it do that? Why can't I, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to fight it and I'm going to throw a fireball. Why isn't that working? Oh my God, run away, if you're not prepared for it. And in the lore like that, it's like, why does nobody know that? Because it hasn't been around for 99 years. Why would anybody know that? You're 3 to 4 generations of like a medieval lifespan away from it. So why would anybody really remember that except as lore? And it was probably just a dragon that they called the Tarrasque.
Now, is the Tarrasque like unique to D&D and to Wizards of the Coast material?
It started there. There are a lot of references to it in other places. There's like a Besem D20 version of it. There's, Pathfinder, of course, has it as soon as 3rd edition did the SRD. Mutants and Masterminds has a version of the Tarrasque that they converted over to that. The Tarrasque appears in StarCraft as a kind of like, it is a Tarrasque.
Just with, a different spelling.
Just with a slightly different spelling. And I think there's even like a giant version of that one, of that unit that's called the Tarrasque, as a thing back to it. And there's even an official D20 version of StarCraft that's out there in the Alternities sort of system that is, has stats that are almost identical to the Tarrasque, just with them StarCraft.
Well, and I assume the origin stories in those are also all widely varied and things of that nature, which, you could pull from to actually create the origin story of the Tarrasque in your world, which I think would be really cool to go in and dive into the different histories, because there's a lot of different interpretations as to what it kind of, where it came from, what its function is, if it's just, this random beast left over from a more ancient and deadly time, to, we have here, it could be a curse from the gods, which I think is a very interesting, the whole judgment of God scenario is always, or judgment of the gods scenario, you have angered me, here, let me throw this beastie down to just judge and terrify you for all eternity sort of thing. That always plays well.
It's when Palor was having a bad day. It's like, yeah, I'm screwed. You know what? I'm all lawful and stuff, but today we're just throwing out the Tarrasque. Deal with it.
Which, it could prove to have some interesting story hooks, instead of maybe, we'll talk about how the Tarrasque dies later, but instead of the normal way, you have to appease whatever god has sent the judgment on you for him to lift the curse of the Tarrasque.
Like if it's a god of war, it's like, hey, we have defeated your Tarrasque in war. Is this sacrifice enough to you?
Sure.
Yeah, it's good. I'll leave you guys for another 100 years. Have some peace.
Now you've almost given me the idea to have like a deity lottery, and it's like every 100 years, it's just like, who gets to pick where the Tarrasque goes? And it's just like, it's me, yes, and then just throw.
They have a battle board with minis and stuff, all of the whole world. Yeah, I'm gonna put it here.
Exactly.
All right, guys, let's play Tarrascan Terrors. Okay, how do we do this now?
That would be amazing. The other common thread is that it was created by wizards, and I want to know what it would take and what kind of epic level wizards would be involved in the creation of this massive world-ending sort of beastie.
Yeah.
Because I can't imagine, as much as I love wizards, I can't imagine even a level 20th wizard creating something quite like that.
You know, it seems like one of those, like, the spell goes wrong, the sort of thing you do on a fluke. You know, you're like, all right, we're going to make the battle beast for the king and country. We've got a cabal of like 15 wizards. We're doing it. We've got these battle beasts. We're giving it regeneration so it can get up at the end of the battle. And hey, Joe, why didn't you dot your I's and cross your curly T's in the runes? Oh God, the regeneration is way higher. What do we do now? Go to a new country. That's what we do. And this country won't come after us because we just built the Tarrasque in the middle of it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking too, was like that cabal of liches would be the evil thing, is like, okay, well, we're going to just use with our powers combined, casting pollution. But them getting together and thinking who cares? Let's make the biggest, baddest thing that we can possibly do. And, and it almost makes me think of manipulating, like starting from a dragon and it turning into the Tarrasque and almost like going from that perspective. But yeah, all three of us have already admitted it's not a wizard, it's wizards or a group. It's just this thing transcends your normal level of power into like a group.
Well, and to give a shout out to our buddy Matt, it could also be that they discovered a dinosaur, and because it looks very dinosaur-esque, and they decided to put it through some rituals to fortify it, because this is the biggest creature we've ever seen. We're going to use this as sort of our MAD device in case another kingdom comes after us, and it ends up being their own destruction in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even in a little more in the 3.5 and the 4 art, and the 5 art definitely, but they describe it as having that bird-like gait, that kind of hunched-over walking sort of thing. So I think they definitely, as they kind of morph through the ages of D&D, we're definitely going more for that, because it does feel like the big dinosaur. It is the T-Rex until they actually put T-Rexes in. It does have that same niche for D&D.
Yeah.
One of my favorite origins, though, is the stuff they kind of briefly in like a paragraph touched on in the Spelljammer setup. And the planet Falx, Falx, where there are a ton of Tarrasques. They're just one of the things. And enjoy landing here. Oh, sorry, your ship's engine broke. Enjoy it.
Oh, that's horrible.
And there's like this, there's like this Illithid like mind flayer race and this like goblin like race there that are like the alien versions of those. But it's like, yep, they live underground because these Tarrasque like creatures live above ground. So,
and somehow there was an interdimensional portal which brought it to your world. Yay!
Well, that's one of the plot hooks I wrote up, is that like a strange airship flies into your town and says, "Hey, we've got these tiny little creatures. Do you want to trade for them?" And they start out about yay big, maybe a foot across, and everybody's like, "This is awesome. We have these little like vicious creatures. We'll train them as guard dogs." Why won't it stop growing?
Yeah. How big do these things actually get? Yeah.
Clifford, the big red god.
Yep. So now, we've talked about it and how terrifying it is, and it is very terrifying. But let's get into some of the specifics of the power that the Tarrasque has, different immunities and all that stuff.
So, and I think that is one of the things that makes the Tarrasque truly terrifying, is that, you go against a dragon, you go against something like that, even though it's intelligent and it's fighting strongly, you have a chance to affect it. You know what works on it. You can figure it out. This green dragon is not really taking much acid damage, so we have to use something else. But the Tarrasque is immune to pretty much everything. Fire, poison, bludgeoning damage, piercing damage, slashing damage, unless it's non-magical. It has resistance to any spell it has resistance to any spell, but then it has just instant, nothing will attack it, nothing will harm it as far as a spell goes. If you have to make a roll for it, if it has line in the word, if it has, ranged attack, it can only be, you have to get it to make a saving throw for any spell to even think about affecting it. And then, if you accidentally do cast that, most of the time it just bounces off. 1 in 6 times, it bounces off back at you. I had a great time, like, to a group that wasn't quite prepared, didn't quite read up, even though I gave them the page, said you can read everything. They glossed over that. In comes the sorcerer with fireballs. Nothing. Hey, guess what I just rolled? How do you like that? And just spent the rest of the combat charred. So if you don't know those things, that's what makes the Tarrasque really dangerous.
Yeah, and did we talk about the legendary saves that it gets to those?
Oh, not even legendary saves. The 5e sort of thing. It's just 3 times in the combat. Oh, the Tarrasque failed this roll? No, he didn't. Tick one off. No, you don't get to do that. It's great to use those as a DM and just watch the players be like, all right, we got this. Oh, we forgot about that. How do we do this? Or like, kind of like work out their strategy for like, how do we make the Tarrasque bleed those off, because we've got a spell, we want to polymorph it, but we have to make sure it uses the legendary saves on something else.
Yeah, because the legendary save in 5e, I mean, I remember just reading through the monster manual as a new DM in 3.5 and looking at the Tarrasque and going, oh my goodness, like this thing, you don't want to go up against it, one, with non-magical weapons because it's immune to all damage from non-magical weapons, and then you don't want to throw spells at this thing because it's got so much spell immunity and resisted, like there's no way that you can get through that. And so in 5e, to make it even more deadly, that those legendary resistances where you can just go, no, like it's so much more just mean and destructive in that regard.
I mean, especially when you can consider how low you would have to have rolled in the first place to fail. I mean, because the bonuses that the Tarrasque already has to pretty much everything it's doing are astronomical. So you're probably looking, definitely at a single digit number, possibly a 1 or a 2. And then 3 times during that, you're just like, never mind. He's fine.
Well, yeah, because a lot of the, unless you're throwing something at it that's like a will save or a dex save or something of that nature, its strength is absolutely ridiculous. Its constitution is absolutely ridiculous. And so anything that you're going to try to do that's going to actually affect this thing, you're going to have to roll really, really well. Otherwise, it's just going to be immune.
Your best bet with spells is generally on the dexterity or the intelligence sort of spectrum. It only has a +5 to its intelligence, saves. Charisma is +9, wisdom is +9. So even though it has low stuff there, it's still kind of ridiculous based on how they've designed it. And then you have to get into the fact that you can't charm it, it's immune to that. You can't frighten it, it's immune to that. You can't paralyze it, it's immune to that. So you can't poison it, it's immune to that. So anything you can do tactically like that, you have to think around that. You have to do stuff that it will be forced to react to in some ways. And even then, your psychic powers are still like, you can kind of make this ruling as a GM that like, oh yeah, you're going to use something that is magically psychic. The Tarrasque doesn't have a mind and can't process that. So yes, you've created this giant illusion and the Tarrasque doesn't care. It can still smell you. Still has blind sight.
Well, and you touched some on the condition immunities, which is the next thing we wanted to talk about. So you said it's immune to charm, it's immune to fear, it's immune to paralyze and poison. Are there any other immunities that it has that we should know about?
Not in the raw Tarrasque on there,
or any that we could throw in as DMs if we're planning on using this even from other sources.
Oh God, yes. Then it gets fun. I often actually, when I'm running this, I love seeing the players come up with really interesting ideas. So I roll some of that stuff back or be like, all right, you know what, that makes it more fun, that makes it more interesting, and let that stuff happen. Lightning, every lightning spell is kind of up in the air as to whether that will work, because if it has line, it's supposed to bounce off, but I often give them a little bit of a pass on that. If it's like lightning coming down from the sky, I'm like, nah, logically that would work. But you can always throw in more immunities to be like, yes, it is tougher, it just kind of shakes that off, because I know you guys tried the chest burster tactic on it. It's like, oh yeah, we weren't not going to mention the chest burster, but it's like, okay, so how would that work? And so after running that game with you guys, I kind of wrote up like, how would you work that? I'm like, yeah, you're a zombie or creature or summon thing that is bursting out, that is, so the chest burster, for the people who aren't aware of it, is as you guys worked it out, raise a zombie or a summoned creature, stick a potion of growth inside its mouth, teleport it.
Polymorph it first into a bear, and then put
into the heart,
And then,
the lung.
That was
to the
Neal
lung, yeah.
getting in the heart, yeah. Teleport it into the lung, and then make it drink the potion to explode out of the chest for massive damage. And that works. I'm going to give that to you because that is a fun and interesting tactic. But there's also the how much damage does it take, and can it even, if the Tarrasque has bones that are like iron, what would a thing growing into an iron cage, look like? Yeah, so you kind of have to play the logic game there and say like, yeah, let's give some damage to the Tarrasque, but also that's like a one-shot wonder. And also, doing it with a zombie, that is the only thing that, like, oh, you summoned a bear or a celestial in a bear, body. Celestial's like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, I don't care. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not happening today.
Yeah. So we've talked about damage immunities. We've talked about condition immunities. What sort of resistances does the Tarrasque have, damage-wise, that would make it a little harder to defeat outside of its normal immunities?
So it has, the magic resistance that, gives it saving throw against all spells and magical effects. It has the resistance, which is a damage immunity against piercing, slashing, non-magical. As far as other stuff that is actually considered a resistance, it has a lot of hit points.
That is very true.
That is kind of where it has a lot of hit points, and, I can't run a Tarrasque without regeneration, so, I've got rules in the Book of the Tarrasque for either a mild regeneration or a constant regeneration, or one that triggers one in every 6 sort of chance.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe in 3.5 it did have a pretty substantial passive regeneration, but not in 5e, right?
Not in 4, not in 5. And they kind of removed that because it does already take a lot to take down. But adding it back in is not hard to do at all. And I feel like that really gives the weight to the you have to use a wish to kill this sort of thing. It's no longer just this monster. It is now this monster of myth with regeneration again.
Right. That's what shocked me at first. You told us to study up on the Tarrasque and all of that, and I had never seen a Tarrasque outside of 5e, out of 3.5, because I skipped 4e altogether, and I'm a recent 5e convert. So I was like, where's the health regeneration? And that is something as a DM that if you are going from the raw of 5e, I would definitely add in, because it makes the Tarrasque that much more legendary. Like you said, I mean, it makes it feel more like the 3.5 version, which you never, ever, ever wanted to encounter, and nobody ever used because it was just so mean.
Even if you do it in a kind of thematic way where, it's like, oh, it regenerates 15 hit points around or 20 hit points around or something, when you're fighting it anywhere between 15th and 20th level, that like, okay, we can probably do that, it just adds that little extra thing in the players' minds of how are we going to deal with that? Okay, we've got to, keep this constant damage wheel going, we've got to go to like World of Warcraft style MMO, like damage per second, how do we do this and how do we keep this up, it makes you think through those tactics or run away, which is awesome, and I've seen groups do, just be like, we got it down to 150 hit points, and when it went back up to 200, we said, we're done.
We're done.
We're walking away from this and coming back to it later.
The kind of final two pieces that I feel are one of the lesser things, but if you're not prepared, like this will really mess your group up, are Frightful Presence and Swallow Whole. I mean, so I say that because the Frightful Presence, if you play your cards right, you can't be feared either, because you're already 20th level. You eat the
Hero's Feast.
The feast. Yeah, the Hero's Feast and Swallow Whole. Hey, I'm the guy that wants it. I'm going in. Thank you.
Which you did.
Yeah. And you got Inside the Heart, which made me write up extra rules on what to do when you get inside the heart, or inside the lungs or all those other places.
And then I got pushed out and had to use my divine
intervention. Well, what's funny is that Swallow Whole is pretty terrifying, because if you're medium-sized, it can swallow anything medium-sized easily. And so it's like, you just see this giant maw coming at you, and there's no way that you're going to win on a strength check against this thing, or whatever the save is for the Swallow Whole, because it's got the strength to, even if it rolls a 2, it's still going to swallow you.
And that's actually large size. It can swallow large. Small.
Yeah.
So good luck if you've taken, 1 potion of growth. You need to take 2 or 3 to not be instantly, eaten down.
Yeah, and of course there's the initial damage, but like what is the trip like on the way down, for just to give you kind of a visual down the gullet of this thing to its stomach, because I think that adds to some of the more like the frightening aspects of, now, this is not just you're not being maybe not being chewed, but you are being swallowed.
Yeah, there is actually, and this is kind of fascinating, if you want a good visual thing to pull out to your players, look up on YouTube, and I forget exactly what it is, but there's documentary footage of where they take a mini camera and put it in like a little, like mouse body, and a wolf comes by and swallows it. And so it actually shows the whole time, it gets chewed on, but it's got a casing, and then it gets swallowed in, and it just shows with the little like night vision light going right down into the throat. It's just this dark, like confining, and then it this plop at the end, into this, acidy, stomachy pit. And as far as mechanics, I mean, you're taking 56 damage every round. You're inside the Tarrasque in the stomach.
It's acid damage, right?
That's acid damage. So, I mean, that's going to get past a lot of your sort of immunities. It's one of those like, no, it'll be fine. It's armor. There's so many things. It's just like, nope, it's acid damage. That doesn't matter. You can just kind of look in the rules and check it off and say you're still taking this. So, yeah, I mean, the moment any character gets swallowed, everybody else is figuring out how to get that character out of the Tarrasque, because if it's the mage, they're like, no, we need that. And if,
yes,
we need you out here in the fight. Get them out and resurrect them. And being inside can be a valid tactic. I've seen barbarians go inside and like, I'm going to hack away at it, which is why I kind of say like, it's nobody is as tough on the inside as they are on the outside. So yeah, I'm giving it a lower armor class. So if you do something like that, it can be a valid tactic if you can survive.
And I think this is worthy of mention. And I know you've said this already, John, but we're talking about just the power of the Tarrasque. I think this is worth a mention here, especially once you've whittled down the hit points, however that manages to happen, and you reduce it to 0. This thing isn't dead. I mean, it's taken out of the fight. It's unconscious, but it is not dead. How do you actually kill this thing?
Yeah. So, and I mean, this is of course one of those raw, 5e, because 5e doesn't quite have that in there. They want to give it a little, different thing. But if you have regeneration and you're going kind of by the old school, the Tarrasque is a monster of myth rules, you have to use a wish generally. I mean, that is exactly how it has been in every other edition up to 4th, is that you have to use a wish. In 4th edition, it had to be, it just went to sleep for a couple of 100 years at that point. But yeah, so you have to find a wish, you have to find something else. In my games, I will allow a lot of really interesting ideas. People will take the Blade of 9 Lives Stealer, and, if they can get a successful hit and steal the last essence of the Tarrasque, that's great. You've got an evil artifact weapon now that commands its owner to bloodlust, but it has stolen the essence of the Tarrasque, and the Tarrasque is not around until that weapon is destroyed.
Well, and I don't know, in 3.5, you could use Wish or you could use Miracle. Yeah.
Right. Because Miracle is the
cleric version of that. So I don't know if there is that in 5e. I haven't played a cleric yet. And I think that that's a great component of the fight. Not only do you have to like prep for all of these immunities and these resistances and, go in there knowing that you're probably going to die, but you also have to have some sort of thing beyond just killing it to kill it. And I love what you said, and I've heard other people echo this, maybe not in the way that you said it, but you're, as a DM, grant wishes like a vengeful genie.
That's what I was going to mention, was that in 5th edition, if you're making this wish, it's not just easy, it's done thing. It's if you word it correctly, you'll probably get what you want, probably with something else.
I love doing that. Your guys was awesome. Who was it? Corey was the one who had the wish, the barbarian with the luck blade, and he had 3 wishes in it. And everybody was like, let's make a pit big enough that the Tarrasque falls into a terminal velocity. All right, we can do that. 3 miles long should be about right. All right, so how are you guys getting out of the 3 mile radius and not falling in there with it, And then the moment I did that, and the moment you do that to a group of players, they start thinking like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, we know what we have to do now, So yeah, I mean, and wishes are great that way. I don't know if I do a divine miracle with the same level, unless it's like a trickster god or a chaotic evil or a lawful evil. Yeah, and then that's sort of going to your demon, kind of like, oh yeah, no, we'll take care of the Tarrasque, but this contract is signed in blood, and we're going to have to figure out how it screws you too, sort of thing.
Well, and that poses the problem of now you've got this other entity to deal with, which could pose some interesting consequences.
And that's a great plot hook too. Like maybe it's the greater demon that sets you, like onto the path and says, hey, I want the Tarrasque out of the world. I will absolutely help you get rid of it when the time comes, but it's got to be killed by a mortal hand. All right, I'll take care of it. Now the Tarrasque is my pet.
Well, I like where you've helped us segue. Do we have other adventure hook ideas? I mean, the first one that comes to my mind, of course, is the one that I'm helping write as a freelancer, is the Salt and Wounds setting. And essentially the Tarrasque is stuck, and an entire population has existed now on eating and harvesting the Tarrasque. Now, granted, I don't think that's necessarily what we are thinking about, because I think like our goal here is to show you, the listener, how to make it the special thing that it's always been, and to elevate the Tarrasque to this like very infrequently used but definitely used encounter that your players will just talk about for a really long time. I mean, my favorite thing would be, and this is kicking it super old school, of just like your players get to a point where they're essentially demigods in back in 2nd edition, and then it's just like we're strolling down the street and now there's a Tarrasque, because it's like at that point it's one of the few things you can throw at your players that will really shake things up, and they have to work super hard to try and defeat it.
And that's one of the really cool things about the Tarrasque or a high level monster like this is, it makes a great campaign ender, because all my games have generally been the same. Like, oh man, we're getting up into the high levels, we've saved the kingdom, we've saved the country, we've fought off the demons, we're level 13. Do we really want to keep playing because we've gotten through the interesting stuff? But you can always pull the Beowulf out, and Beowulf had all his adventures. But then there's this little end cap at the end where he's old and retired, and he's like, let's go fight a dragon, and that's my final battle, is fighting this dragon. Okay, cool, let's take, you're all at level 13, you all jump up to level 17 or 18, and the Tarrasque is out. You're all now maybe 10 years older, but you're the heroes. You're the people who can come through and end this. So let's see what your last adventure is like,
Yeah, and do you save the world that one last time? Yeah.
Right.
The other one I just thought of, and I feel really bad because I know it's not my idea, and so I don't know who told this to me. So hopefully it's you, John, and I can immediately give credit where credit is due. But essentially having the Tarrasque be a thing that is known, like your players start and they can see off over in the distance the Tarrasque is just ruining everything, and that's their motivation to adventure and try and become powerful enough quickly enough to stop the Tarrasque from doing it, which I think really can elevate a whole campaign, knowing that that motivation is literally look to the right, there's smoke, dust, destruction literally right over there, and that's what could keep your players going and kind of keep that urgency of the matter.
I love the idea that you had earlier where there's baby Tarrasques everywhere, or Tarrasques along a line of maturity, and so maybe you're practicing, you've got the Tarrasque and now you've got tons of other little Tarrasquelings, if you want to call them that are kind of the forerunners of the Tarrasque, and now you're looking at something similar to like an Eldrazi plague that's sweeping across the planet. And now you've got to fight baby Tarrasques, and that's how you're leveling up. And obviously, they're not going to be anywhere near as strong. They're not going to have all the time to absorb the magic that they're going to need to have the immunities and the resistances. They're still mean. They're still ready and willing to kill and destroy, just like their papa or their mama. But it's a plague that's hit the world, and now you've got to deal with it. And the only way to deal with it is to kill the parent, but you can't do that until you fight your way through the hordes of mini Tarrasques.
That I'm starting up a campaign at a local meetup that's kind of going to be playing out one or two of these plot things that I've kind of built or kind of conceptualized, but that's one of them where somebody used a wish to get rid of the Tarrasque, but they misworded it and they said we don't want the Tarrasque to be the singular threat it has been to the world. All right, cool. So the wish spawns off a bunch of Tarrasque, which is the actual French town, name of the French town where the Tarrasque was, like the actual real world myth was around. So they spin off a bunch of Tarrasque, which are these, 8-foot tall giant beasts, but not like the main Tarrasque, and they're all over the world now, and they decimate the local populations. But the world kind of comes to a balance after a couple of years, and people are like, well, they can be trained. So, all right, we've got beasts of burden and war mounts. And, rather than riding around on a war horse, let's ride around on this giant already armored mini Tarrasque sort of thing. And that's great for a long time. And they're trainable and they're actually kind of friendly until something happens and you ride into a town and you're like, the only thing left here is the Tarrasque. Why?
Well, I think a cool, like you mentioned balance, like eventually it restores. What if the Tarrasque is the equalizer for your world? Say your world can only, for whatever magical reason, can only support X number of population, and then the Tarrasque wakes up and has to purge the earth. And that's sort of the cleansing mechanism for the planet. And it doesn't necessarily happen at a set time interval. It's just whenever the maximum number of occupancy for the planet is the thing that sends the Tarrasque after the world to kind of cleanse it. Yeah, I mean, that would be kind of cool. Like, it's the restorer of balance, sort of like the Avatar, if you will. But in a much more violent form.
Well, then that was my thought too. I mean, you could also play into like real world stuff, and that helps motivate campaigns and things like that. Where essentially you have what I will now term as the MMD, the monster of mass destruction, and this nation has one, this one doesn't, or they've created one, and playing out. And you could even and so I just turned the Tarrasque into almost a political campaign with this looming threat of what happens if one lets it loose. Will the other? What happens?
So, John, we want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about the Tarrasque. It's been a great conversation. And if people want to know more about you or want to get in contact with you, how exactly would they go about doing that?
All right. So, it has been great being on and talking about destroying worlds with the Tarrasque. That is always the fun part of it. Yeah. So you can find the Book of the Tarrasque at DriveThruRPG. The print version should be out soon if everything, all the I's get dotted and T's get crossed. But if you want to find me, of course, I am at Gnome Stew, managing things, keeping it working behind the scenes over there and making sure everybody can write what they want. You can also find me. I have a pretty unique name. There aren't many other John Arcadians out there. I doubt the veracity of most of them when I have found them. So if you Google John Arcadian or twitter.com John Arcadian or facebook.com John Arcadian, that is me. The only place where that doesn't hold true is YouTube, where I have a doppelbro who uses the name, and I'm just not 100% sure about what's going on there, but so Twitter, Facebook, a doppelbro, yeah. But outside of that, John Arcadian, pretty much anywhere that you find, and Googling it will be me.
Awesome. Well, we want to thank you again, and it was a pleasure having you on the Dungeon Masters.
So much fun.
All right, well, we'd like to thank John once again for joining us on the Dungeon Masters block. It was an absolute pleasure to have him. We are so thankful that he was able to join us. And Neil, if the listeners would like to get a hold of us, how do they do that?
They can always send us an email over at dungeonmasterblock@gmail.com. That's, of course, if 140 characters just won't do. And if you want to show us some extra love and get your 5-star review read on air verbatim, you can always head over to iTunes. And as always, if you're in a different country, let us know so we can find it even easier.
If you would like to follow us on Twitter, the handle is at DMS_block. That's at DMs_block. Or you can like us on Facebook. We will let you know on those two sites when we drop a new episode. We'll also post polls on there and all kinds of fun memes and information to keep you up to date on what is going on in the DMs block world, and all kinds of fun stuff. You'll be able to find all of us there as well, all of our personal Twitters and that kind of thing, if you would like to connect with us there and be limited to 140 characters. We now are going to go into our Patreon shout out, and our Patreon member this week is
Eric Schaefer.
Yeah, he is a mighty silver dragon.
Yes, thank you, Eric.
People love gold dragons, but silver's my favorite. So he's going to be flying through the DMs block forum and be casting frost breath everywhere. So thanks, Eric, for your patronage. We really appreciate it, and welcome to the other side, my friend.
And the Dungeon Masters Block is a proud member of the Block Party Podcast Network, and you can go check out our other shows like the GM Showcase, Geek Wars, and We're So Bad at Adventuring,
with a few more coming down the pike.
Heyo!
Heyo!
And that's all we have here at the Dungeon Masters Block, the place where we focus on the Dungeon Master, the most important person in the game, the only person capable of playing God,
killing characters,
and lowering the ego of all the other people at the table. Good night and good luck.
And we'll see you next week on the Dungeon Masters block.
Goodbye.